Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is William Chris Headley, and I am the Associate Director of the Electronic Systems Lab at the Hume Center for National Security and Technology. And my colleague, Dr. Johnson, will be presenting this talk with me, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, guys. How are you doing? My name is Amos Johnson. I'm a college professor at Morehouse College. I've been there for about 15 years, and I'm in the computer science department. I'm originally from Georgia, and I've done all my education in Georgia, Morehouse College, Georgia Tech. So I'm a Georgia boy.
So this talk is a little different than probably some of the other talks. We're going to be talking about how we're using GitHub, not just for code organization and code development for a technical project. We're actually going to be talking about how we use it for a multi-college undergraduate research experience. And so for this presentation, I'm going to start by just introducing ourselves here. And then Dr. Johnson's going to give the background and motivation. And then he's also going to give a little bit of introduction on the first semester of the effort in the spring 2020 semester. And this was kind of mostly before COVID-19 hit. Obviously, we all know that has some unique problems associated with it that we're going to talk about today. Following up on that discussion and based on the outcomes of that semester, I'm going to talk about how we moved towards a GitHub focal point architecture for our project in the fall 2020 semester. And obviously, that's in the thick of COVID-19. And then finally, after I talk about that, Dr. Johnson, I'll hand it back over to him to give our final takeaways and thoughts on the project. With that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Johnson for the background and motivation.
Thanks, Chris. So this is a project that we call VIP. VIP stands for Vertically Integrated Projects Team. It's a team of students in undergrad, usually from sophomore to senior year, working together across disciplines to do some interesting research. And so what we made different is that usually VIP happens within one institution, but we wanted to do was create a virtual VIP team between two different institutions with two different geographical locations. So we got Virginia Tech Hume Center for National Security and Technology. They've been a leader in radio frequency machine learning research for many years. And we have Morehouse College, and we're a historically Black college. And so the last 150 years, we've been preparing young men to change the world through ethical leadership driven by compassion, civility, and integrity. So one of our most famous graduates is Martin Luther King Jr. is one of our most famous graduates. We have some institutional goals that we're trying to do through the ICCA program, which stands for Intelligence Community Center for Academic Excellence. And our goal in terms of research is this joint collaboration of state-of-the-art RF technology and image recognition for spectrum sensing applications, right? Such as signal detection and modulation recognition. From a team goal, from a VIP goal, we're trying to create this collaboration to develop a framework between institutions that can be replicated in other places. The reason we're really doing this in terms of diversification is because if you go to an HBCU or even a non-R1 institution, R1 stands for Research One institution, what happens is you don't have the depth of experiences in different technologies that you would have at a Research One, like a Virginia Tech, like a Georgia Tech, like MIT or Stanford, those types of institutions, right? So these minority students who are at these HBCUs, they're lacking some research experiences that could advance their careers or could get them into certain graduate schools if they don't have those particular experiences. So this collaboration is really allowing us to kind of close that gap. And it's also giving students who are at a Research One, is giving them a broader experience. So when they develop problems, when they develop solutions, they can develop better solutions for a broader world. Next slide, Chris. So here's an image of kind of what we're doing here. So we're using a thing called YOLO, which stands for You Only Look Once algorithm. It's a deep learning algorithm, and it's used mainly for image processing. So it takes an image, it can identify objects in the image in terms of detect where they are, and it also can do labeling of the objects in the image. So what we're doing is we're applying this technology to wireless signal spectrum. So you can take wireless signals, and you can create an image out of these wireless signals, and then you can detect where they are. You can do estimation, and you can do classification, right? And so that's our goal, is to test to see how we can do that in terms of research objective. From a student standpoint, we're exposing them to wireless communication, spectrum systems, and machine learning. And then just from a diversity standpoint, we're doing just do a diverse multi-college experience with many moving parts like data set generation, machine learning, testing, and evaluation. Next slide. So this is our pre-COVID semester, right? And so we say pre-COVID is when the world was normal, like, that we know about, right? And so in this pre-COVID semester, what you see here is kind of a chart of our demographics, right? We had two teams, roughly 50-50 on each side. We had Morehouse students and we had Virginia Tech students. So you can see the demographic data is there. From the Morehouse side, all the students were in computer science. On Virginia Tech side, we had a variety of majors from CS to engineering to different space and also chemistry, right? And we can see the breakdown. We had way more males in this study than we had females. Of course, in Morehouse, we're only a male college, whereas Virginia Tech is a co-ed experience. We look at some of the challenges we had for this particular year was that, this is a brand new team project. We got minimal exposure to wireless communication technology, spectrum sensors, and machine learning, right? We got a diverse background of students, not just in ethnicity, but in gender, but in STEM, non-STEM majors. So we got a lot of diversity happening here, right? And we're trying to facilitate this inter-college collaboration with sub-teams with a mixture of Virginia Tech students and Morehouse students. So the really key there is that in these teams, really wanting to mix the students together. We didn't want to have an all Morehouse team and all Virginia Tech team. Next slide, Chris. So this goes into really kind of the heart of our presentation. So this is how we structured this. So in the pre-COVID world, the way this was structured is that the central hub there in the middle was in-person meetings in a laboratory experience. So at Morehouse College, I gathered my students together in a laboratory. Chris gathered his students together in a laboratory, and we teleconference each other into each other's physical space, right? So this kind of presented some problems, right? When you're meeting kind of once a week, right? And we found that it wasn't really granular enough to really account for a lot of the flexibility and facilitating a lot of the dynamic communication needed between these particular meetings. So we noticed these like 1 week lags, right? Also, when they wanted to reach out to me or Chris, we kind of had them come to our office and we kind of had traditional office hours, right? And that kind of created some issues there too. And now in terms of actually communicating between students, this first semester actually was more student driven. It was the students who kind of brought GitHub to us, right? And it really had minimal interaction from the faculty, right? And we were only looking at the output they provided, right? And so this led to issues with, code breaking, right? It had some redundancy in code, people recoding the same sections because there was no organized structure here. Students also brought in Slack in terms of communication structure. But here again, it's really for the students. It wasn't the faculty involved in as well. So if you look at our semester in terms of the pre-COVID last spring, it was really meeting focus. Like we're going to get together in a room in a lab space and we're going to interact through that particular space. And then you guys go figure out the virtual technologies. So that's kind of how it was. Next slide, Chris. And so let's look at some of the results of that, which are not bad per se. Right. Within a university, obviously the collaborations were better. Outside of universities, a little bit not as good. Right. But it's not terrible. It was not as good. Right. It was still that, I'm at Morehouse, I'm at Virginia Tech. Right. So we still kind of had that dynamic going on. Right. And so if you look at the graph there, you can, read the graph for yourself in terms of experiences. But I want you to focus on some of the observations. Right. There was a decrease in positive responses in the collaborations among the sub teams. Right. And the second observation is there was a slight decrease in positive responses within collaborations among college. So which means that the collaboration wasn't as good when we start adding in the diversity pieces, right? And what we're about to get into next is Chris is about to talk about what we did in the fall semester under COVID, under a virtual environment, and we'll see how we fix a lot of these things. Go ahead, Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amos. So as Dr. Johnson just mentioned, we had kind of this hybrid structure in the spring semester in which we had, in-person meetings at our particular institutions, myself at Virginia Tech and Dr. Johnson at Morehouse. But we also had virtual meetings where the whole team got together. And it was very focused on the students were driving most of the collaboration outside of the weekly meetings. And as we could see that there was some limitations to that. And what we wanted to, we took the summer, summer 2020 period, and we said, okay, how can we improve upon this? And we made those changes based on our thoughts for the fall semester. And I'd like to talk about just what we did and what are the outcomes and how they compare against the spring semester. Let's talk about the team. So there was a couple of things different in the fall semester versus the spring. In terms of the demographics, actually, from the Virginia Tech perspective, it actually turned out that we kind of switched the demographics, and we had a much more female-driven project from Virginia Tech. Obviously, Morehouse being an all-male institution was all-male in the demographics. The other thing is that based on how far the actual technical work got, which is not really a primary focus of this talk, we went from 2 sub-teams to 4. Because now the research has gotten more particular, and we needed more sub-teams. The problem got bigger. There was more things to do. So we broke the team up into further sub-teams. So that's going to cause some issues, because we saw that inter sub-team development and collaboration actually was lower than within a given sub-team. So we didn't want to amplify that effect by having more sub-teams. In terms of the majors, it's mostly the same. So Morehouse College is all of our CS students, and then Virginia Tech had, predominantly your STEM students. But we had an added wrinkle this semester that we also had some non-STEM, non-coding experience students from poli-sci and national security majors. Which also added even more reason that we needed to better structure everything so that everybody could collaborate together with diverse experiences. And that's one of the key things that we want to mention here is that, we didn't want collaboration only to mean how many lines of code did you write? How many papers did you read? It's, did you help lead a team? Did you help lead brainstorming sessions? Were you involved? Because, with this diverse set of majors, it wasn't expected that everybody would have the same coding capabilities and the same background. So we wanted to make sure that our experience was more even playing field, as much as we possibly could. Obviously, COVID-19 university restrictions on both ends turned this project into completely virtual now. There was no in-person meetings, no in-person lab experience. They were all working from their own place, whether it be their dorm, their apartment, or at their family's home. And Dr. Johnson and I were primarily at our homes working. So a lot of new challenges here. In terms of the actual project carryover, because of COVID, we actually did have some churn in our students. We got about, I would say, around 50% returning students. So there was the added challenge of, how do we get those new students injected into the project quickly? And that was very important for us to do. And another reason why we needed a better approach to collaboration. So I just wanted to bring this up. This is what Dr. Johnson mentioned, just so you can kind of see where we were and where we went. So I'm not going to spend time going over this again, but just remember that we were very, hands off in terms of the technical component. Dr. Johnson and I were meeting with the students as they needed it in in-person office hours and also during a weekly meeting. But they were pretty much running the show, the code base and everything, which turned out to probably not be the best way to mentor students and get everybody involved and have accountability. So what did we move to? And that's kind of the key why we're here today, is we really moved to a GitHub project focal point. I'm sure everybody that's at this talk is at least partly familiar with GitHub, but GitHub really does provide a lot of tools that prove to be very beneficial for helping improve upon some of the collaboration and engagement issues that we had in the spring. And I kind of wanted to go over those and kind of enlighten folks that are listening to this talk on, how can they use GitHub for more than just obviously from a code technical standpoint? How can you engage students effectively and help them have good outcomes? So what do we got? So the first thing is GitHub issue tracking. This is, you assign issues that are related to the technical work to be done. Sometimes it's even, go fill out a survey or go set up a computer. But it was a central hub for all of the tasking that we had for the students. And what was very nice about that is they can set their own tasking. So while Dr. Johnson and I started by providing them tasks, as they found bugs or they found things that they wanted to add, they started owning the code and started making their own issues. Well, instead of waiting, for the weekly meetings, Dr. Johnson and I were able to see those immediately. We were able to see, clearly defined for this. We were able to clearly see who was doing what task and have real accountability. You said you were going to do this. You assigned it to yourself. How are you doing? So it was very easy to see at a glance what everybody was working on and to find maybe somebody that's falling behind or getting left behind. It focused the technical discussions instead of getting ad hoc emails or Slack messages or just in-person meetings about topics. There was no history of those meetings. It was very hard to collate, or I had to forward the same message to other people who weren't on the initial email. Having the discussion within the issues relevant to the tasking proved to be very beneficial for having a history of what was going on and for the other students to catch up. Even a student that really wasn't tasked with something, if they wanted to learn more about what was going on, they could go read the issue instead of being lost because they weren't on the email chain. So it was very beneficial. GitHub milestones, that allows you to, package a bunch of issues into a single milestone. That helped really with the inter-team collaboration. The teams knew how all of their issues that were assigned to their given subteam interplayed with each other to develop a higher level goal or a feature to our code base. So it really helped students understand when they needed to collaborate amongst the subteams. So that was very beneficial. The GitHub Wiki, that was a one-stop shop for, installation instructions, IT resources, how to connect to our servers, technical references, research, literature review materials, anything relevant to the technical work. Instead of having it in 10 different places or having to forward it through email, it was a one-stop shop for the students, and they could even edit it themselves as they found interesting papers. And it kind of develops our catalog of useful information. And it really did lower the IT and faculty support for how do I get the code to run? How do I, access the server we're using? So very beneficial there. It's not also about, helping the students collaborate, but, there is the fact that Dr. Johnson and I are not fully dedicated to this project because of our time allotment. So we need to make sure that we're using the best of the time that we have available. And these resources really helped with that. Protected master branches and pull requests, being able to lock down the master branch provided the faculty with clear interaction points. When they pushed code and said, I want to merge it into master, it gave me a clear point at which to look at the code and provide feedback. It also reduced the students breaking the code base so that they had to rely on other students fixing things before they could work it. They were working on their own branches. They were allowed to break those as much as they wanted, but the master branch must be protected. So it was a really interesting experience this fall that I think led to great outcomes that I want to mention here. So what are the collaboration outcomes? So what we're showing here is the spring versus the fall. And there's a couple of interesting things that you can see here. So first, the overall experience improved. We were still doing great. We're still kind of between good and great. So it wasn't a vast change, but it was certainly a marketable change. What's really interesting is, as you would expect, the same university performance was kind of level. You can see that in the top left plot. That's because, the same university went from in-person experience where it's a little bit easier to get in a room and whiteboard things out. Now they weren't in the same room. Everybody was virtual. But it did help the between university. It kind of leveled the playing field. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So really, and this is what's really important, is it really helped the collaboration, not only between the sub-teams, but between the universities with a very small decrease, even though we went completely virtual between same university experiences. So, having to deal with all this and still showing improved results, I think is a great result. And I really do think it's because of, this GitHub focus, this one-stop shop for all of this material. So we were very happy with that result. I'll quickly go through the next slides. This is just the technical outcomes. I just wanted to show that, the students not only did, they felt like they collaborated more, but they really felt like they were learning the technical material. They felt like they learned more about wireless comms, machine learning, and spectrum sensing, which is really what we were aiming to do from a technical perspective, because these are not typically taught in their undergraduate coursework, or at least not until their late senior years. One of the things we did notice, though, is that sub teams that weren't dealing with machine learning didn't really learn as much machine learning, and same thing for the other sub teams. So we really think that one thing that we can do, with that GitHub focused architecture in the spring 2021, is have the sub teams be in charge of the pull requests in a kind of a random fashion, or in a cycle fashion, so that each of them can experience the whole code base more often. I think that'll be extremely useful for them to understand holistically the technical contributions of the effort. So this is kind of important, I'm sure, to the audience here. The GitHub outcomes, we'll just say that, they felt that they strongly developed a knowledge for Git and GitHub and code development. And they felt the GitHub repository, if you look at the bottom right, was great experience for them, or a good experience for them. So they really enjoyed that. I put some select quotes here for the GitHub outcomes. They thought GitHub was a very effective way to show our progress and what we're working towards. Kept them with things to do. It was great seeing deadlines and what was assigned. Again, that accountability. But this person said, I never used it before, GitHub issues before, but I really liked it. It was a very effective way to track changes, or track tasks, and keep people accountable. So you can see that it made the students feel better because they knew what they were working on. They knew that other people weren't falling behind. Everybody was accountable, and they felt like a team. So I think this was a really great outcome. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Dr. Johnson to kind of take us home with the takeaways and thoughts of this year of these last 2 semesters of work.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So a couple of takeaways we want to let you guys know about is that moving to the GitHub focused approach to team project coordination, it really improves student and faculty outcomes, right? It really brought the project together in a way that we didn't have in the first semester, with issue tracking, milestones, and allowed for a much easier project tracking and technical discussions, right? We had minimal email traffic. We didn't need to forward information back and forth between people. It reduced the IT infrastructure and burden and increased accountability and trackability between students. Also, with the diversity of students and their backgrounds in multi-colleges, I think from Chris' perspective, he really rewarded the challenge of understanding how to best assign tests and to teach and mentor the different concepts, right? I think every student connecting virtually really remove the institutional bias and close the distance gap. When we had some people in the lab and some people not in the lab, it really kind of was this weird thing. And even the collaboration between me and Chris and the other partners in the all virtual space, it kind of put everybody on the same playing field. A couple of things, if you want to try this yourselves, you really want to maybe look at having some graduate TAs to help fill in some of the knowledge gaps between students. And if another thing I want to throw in too is if GitHub want to add a communication layer like Slack, I think that'll be helpful too. So we have to switch out to like Teams. Chris, you want to give the final word?
Yeah, I would just say that, you would think in a COVID world that, things would have just gotten worse. And what we noticed is, obviously, we wish that there's no replacement for a real whiteboard. I love a good whiteboard, being in person, getting that, nearby experience, having the students in the lab. We do miss that. But, there's something interesting that kind of came about this, about, if you're working virtually and having everybody, in this case, Zoom, where you're seeing everybody's faces, it's like you're talking one-on-one, but in a group setting, that whole, leveling the playing field, it almost felt more personable in some ways, which was not what we expected at the beginning. So, I think there's, some threads to pull there, how we can do this virtual experience, this remote, how do we bring people together virtually at different institutions, and how do we scale this if we had 3 or 4 institutions? So I think there's a lot of work to do, but I think, COVID, obviously, wish it never happened, but, there's been some unique takeaways that have been benefits that have helped us in this process. And, we'll take what we can get and are positive in this COVID world right now. So, Yeah, that's it. I'll say, yeah. So questions, obviously there's no live Q&A here, but here's our email addresses. If you'd like to reach out to myself, my email's at the top and Dr. Johnson email at the bottom there. And I'll just say thank you very much for listening to this talk. Dr. Johnson, any final word from you?
No final words. Just thanks for having us on. I appreciate our time together.
Yeah, and thank you very much to GitHub for the experience. This is a very unique venue, and we're happy to participate. Thank you.